Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime.
I have a question for you about something that we've talked about a few times already on this very podcast. But I want to know what you know about the inception of this.
The inception? Of what?
What do you know about the beginning of genetic testing as a means to solve crimes?
You know, I don't really know a lot about the inception of genetic testing to solve crimes. I know that when I hear older cases, and when I say older, I mean like as recent as the late 1980s, that evidence with DNA and genetic material wasn't advanced enough to actually make any kind of meaningful discoveries or connections. And I know based on what you've shared before, the only thing that could really be done was blood type testing, and that was kind of the precursor to actual genetic material being used to solve crimes.
Yes, it seems like in addition to the blood typing, that there was an awareness, at least in the 80s for sure, that genetic testing was on the horizon to be able to find a match to a DNA sample that was left at the scene of a crime by the perpetrator, because you see there was more preserving of that type of evidence. I mean, even when we were talking about Sherry Rasmussen, they swabbed that bite mark on her arm, but they couldn't DNA test it at that point.
Did they already know in the 1980s, like A to T and anything about the human genome? Did they know how genetics were written and placed together and in a double helix?
I'm going to say yes. Do I know for sure? No, but I'm going to say yes.
I do believe that at least a rudimentary understanding of DNA was in place in the 1950s, because I think Crick and Watson, Crick and Wilson, Crick and Wilkins, Crick and Watson discovered DNA, but they actually copied the notes of their female counterpart, Rosalind something. I know that we have a mutual friend who I think has a t-shirt of the woman they copied their DNA notes off and then won a Nobel Prize for.
Okay, party.
Wild conjecture if any of that's right or not, but I think that's correct. So I withdraw my question about did they know A to T and double helix and all of that.
On that note, it's July 31st, 1986 in Leicestershire, England.
When?
July 31st, 1986.
Micah was like 2 months old.
Your brother?
Yes.
Party. Yeah, May 86.
Yes. He's 3 years younger than my sister.
Leicestershire, England.
Leicestershire.
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 Okay.
No, really, how do you say it?
Leicestershire.
Leicestershire. Mm-hmm. Like less assured.
Yeah, I guess. Our British listeners can come for you. Leicestershire, England. 15-year-old Dawn Ashworth left her family home to spend the afternoon with her friend. When she got to her friend's house, the friend and her family were not home, so she turned around and headed back to her house.
Did she have plans to go to their house?
It doesn't seem like they had formal plans because they weren't there when she got there. I mean, it's summer.
Okay.
So maybe they were close in a way that they would just kind of turn up at each other's...
They would just drop in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dawn had promised her parents when she left that she would be back by 9:30 that evening. But despite leaving her friend's house in the afternoon, not long after she left her own home, Dawn failed to make it home by her curfew, and her family grew concerned. 2 days later, her body was located near 10 Pound Lane, a local footpath. She had been brutalized and sexually assaulted before being strangled to death. A little over a week later, an arrest was made. Richard Buckland, who was 17 at the time and working as a kitchen porter, was arrested on the 8th of August, 1986. He had apparently known about her body, and under questioning, he admitted to killing her. But the police became frustrated with Richard when he failed to admit to killing another girl in a strikingly similar way and in close proximity to where Dawn had been killed. On November 21st, 1983, a little under 3 years before, 15-year-old Lynda Mann left her babysitting job and headed home on foot, as usual. The temperature in Leicestershire in November would have likely been between 35 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 2 to 10 degrees Celsius.
That sounds so nice. That sounds so nice.
Because it's 90-something degrees outside right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's mentally go there so we can feel chill and refreshed.
I'm in Britain.
Yeah.
It's November.
Yes.
What November day?
November 21st.
1983.
Yes. A few months after my dad broke his neck.
Like a month after my sister was born.
Almost.
September, October, November. 2 months after my sister was born.
Almost 3 because it's November 21st.
3 months after my sister was born. And it was nice and chilly. 35 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
Okay.
And that could be one explanation for why, instead of going her normal route, she took a shortcut.
Lynda changed up her route?
Mm-hmm. And when Lynda did not make it home, her parents and other members of the community spent the night searching for her.
Okay. Did they know what alternate route she would have taken?
Well, not until the following morning when her body was found on a thoroughfare known as the Black Pad. She had been strangled, and it was determined that she had also been sexually assaulted prior to her death. The subsequent investigation in 1983 did not go very far, as there was minimal evidence, no witnesses who came forward, and until Richard's arrest in 1986, there had not been any suspects. But he would not admit to killing Lynda Mann. Still, the police could not ignore how similar the two attacks had been. Both 15-year-old girls, both walking home, both sexually assaulted and strangled, with both of their bodies being left near footpaths within a mile of each other. Since each girl was sexually assaulted, there were fluids left at the scene, and the police had the semen sample collected from Dawn's attack tested against the sample that was collected from Lynda's. It was determined that the blood types matched. Like you were saying, blood typing. This furthered their assertion that Lynda and Dawn had been attacked by the same person. Not only were these two crimes similar, but it will be revealed that this perpetrator had actually sexually assaulted 2 other women under similar circumstances.
Were they also dead?
No. A 16-year-old in 1975 was forced into a field and sexually assaulted, assumably his first victim. And then he attacked and killed Lynda Mann. And in October of 1985, which Lynda Mann was November 1983, October 1985, he sexually assaulted another 16-year-old, threatening her with a screwdriver and holding a knife to her throat.
And where does Dawn fit into this timetable again?
She was after that. She was 1986.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So 2 survived and 2 did not. Mm-hmm. Were semen or genetic material collected at each of those incidents?
Just the 2 murders, it seems. To me, knives are scary. I mean, obviously, knives are scary when they're being used in a threatening manner.
Knives are scary. That's a good point.
Hot take. But there's something very menacing about threatening someone with a screwdriver.
Very painful. Tearing of the skin versus
slicing of the skin. Yeah.
I can't imagine where the entry point would be for this screwdriver. Every scenario is terrifying.
Well, fortunately, nobody in this case found out.
Okay.
Yeah, the screwdriver was not used. It was just threatened. Back to the evidence. The matching blood type was helpful, but obviously not conclusive, which is where Alec Jeffries, Peter Gill, and Dave Werrick come in.
What was the blood type? Was it a common blood type? Was it...
I don't know what the blood type was.
Okay.
I don't remember reading anything about what the blood type was other than that it matched.
Okay.
Between Dawn's murder and Lynda's murder.
Okay.
In the year before Dawn's death, so 1985, These 3 men worked on DNA extraction methodologies that had not previously been available, and they were able to conclusively say, after comparing the semen samples from both victims, that their attacks had been perpetrated by the same person.
Wow.
And that the person who had killed the girls was not Richard Buckland.
Oh.
Yeah, making him the first person ever proven innocent using DNA profiling.
How did they I understand with genetic material how they can so quickly and so easily discount someone as a potential suspect. But what was the process? Was he did he willingly give his DNA sample? Was he already arrested?
Yeah, he had been arrested for Dawn's murder, but the police were frustrated that he wouldn't admit to also killing Lynda, remember?
Okay.
But if you also remember, he was 17 when he allegedly killed Dawn, or confessed to killing Dawn, which would have put him at 14 when Lynda was murdered.
And how young in 1975?
Well, 1979. When that 16-year-old, 10?
Okay.
But they hadn't connected all of these cases. This is just information that came out after the fact.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, wild that they thought a 10-year-old committed that crime.
No.
I mean, not to say it's impossible, but...
Right, but yeah.
What are the chances?
I mean, in what world is a 10-year-old going to overpower a 16-year-old? I guess it's possible, but it's not a very likely scenario.
Yeah.
So, Richard had learning difficulties that likely made him vulnerable during the police questioning, leading to him giving a false confession. Either way, DNA profiling saved this young man from being convicted of 2 murders that he did not commit. With these new advancements in DNA profiling, the police initiated what is considered to be the largest manhunt in Leicestershire history, asking men from age 16 to 34 to volunteer DNA samples. After 6 months...
From how many men?
Men from age 16 to 34.
Okay.
So after 6 months and 1,000 volunteers, there was no definitive match. But there was suspicion cast upon those who had not volunteered to have their DNA tested.
Imagine that.
Why do you think somebody would choose to not, in 1986, volunteer their DNA?
I mean, maybe because the technology was so new, the uncertainty of having this new technology, maybe they understood privacy rights as it relates to genetic material at that time period. Maybe they just didn't want to be caught.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I think that's the number one reason.
It's the best reason.
I mean, that's not to say that there was just one person.
Had they started a backlog of cases from materials that had been collected that might have also been traced back to other men who didn't commit those crimes, but other crimes?
Maybe. I had a lot of similar thoughts about this, as you have new technology, like you said, that they didn't fully understand enough to comfortably consent to it, or they did understand the implications and felt like they didn't know what else their DNA may be used for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think, obviously, some people had probably committed crimes in their background or foreground or ground. I mean, they may just be
Any ground.
A criminal.
Right.
Past, present, future. And I think they were probably happy to continue committing crimes and not being culpable for taking themselves down by volunteering their DNA.
Do you have any idea what the news situation around this advancement in genetic testing was like at the time? Like, did people of the UK have this understanding of, wow, this is really going to shut it down?
I love that you're asking this, because my next sentence is, it seems that there had been a lot of media coverage surrounding this new methodology, what it might do for solving cases where DNA was left behind, and that the plan was they were going to find one case into which they would throw all of their DNA extraction methodology eggs into the basket. And so I'm sure if that contributed in any way to people refusing to volunteer their DNA for this case, because who knows exactly how the media covered it.
Right. Okay. That was my question.
Yeah, that was my next sentence.
There you go.
No one knew anything about it, So it may have been misrepresented or given the 1984 Big Brother edit. Whatever the case may be, it appears that this is the case that they ultimately selected to test this newfangled DNA stuff out on.
I wonder what their selection criteria was. How did they choose this case?
It's probably that they were 15 years old,
Okay.
that they were strangled and sexually assaulted, walking home, white. I mean, we're talking kids, but on the precipice of adulthood.
Right.
That's concerning. You feel like you can't let your kid out into the world as they should be learning about the world without them winding up murdered on the side of a footpath.
Right.
That would be my guess. Almost exactly 1 year after Dawn's body was found, on August 1st, 1987, so a year and a day, an employee at a local bakery named Ian Kelly told a few of his co-workers at a local pub that he had been asked by a colleague of theirs to offer DNA in his place.
Oh. Well, that's not suspicious at all.
No, nary a suspicion was cast.
So a coworker in the bakery
Yes.
said, "Hey, Ian, I need you to share some of your DNA and put my name on it."
Right.
And he didn't report that to police. He just told his buddies in the pub.
Yeah, a year after the crime, but not a year after the DNA was asked for.
That should have been a red flag. That should have immediately made Ian Kelly say, "Oh, so you're the murderer."
Right, but this colleague, Colin Pitchfork, had altered his passport by replacing his
Pitchfork.
pitchfork, yeah.
Colin Pitchfork.
Yeah.
Okay. We can stop the case now. It's clear. Pitchfork. Got it. Okay.
He had altered his passport by replacing his picture with Kelly's, and had Kelly use that as identification. Pitchfork apparently told Kelly that he needed his help because he did not want to be harassed by the police because of a conviction he had in his youth for burglary. So Kelly agreed to help him, and the plan worked, initially.
Fantastic. I'm glad that people like Colin Pitchfork.
Like who?
What did I say?
Pitchfork.
I'm
Was
so
a grill
glad
master.
that people like Colin Pitchfork can recruit their naive friends to help them with schemes like this. Poor Ian Kelly. Ian Kelly?
Yeah.
Did he have any kind of...
Well, he wasn't concerned about the police harassing him for a conviction in his background, so I'm assuming no.
Right, but now his face is associated with his friend's name.
Well, now.
Right.
But what does that matter if his DNA made it seem like Colin Pitchfork was a stand-up guy?
Okay, fair enough. I wouldn't let someone assume... Actually, you want my identity, you can have it.
You gotta take my
You
debt.
get the credit score.
You get the debt too. So a woman at the pub overheard Kelly telling this story and grew concerned enough to inform the police, who located Kelly and, when questioned, admitted to falsely identifying himself as Colin Pitchfork when he offered his DNA. As it turned out, Colin Pitchfork had been questioned after Lynda's body had been found.
Okay.
But was not considered a suspect because he had been the caregiver of his son at the time of her death.
Why was he questioned?
He was in the area, I believe, or his car was in the area. And they did not believe that he would have left his baby unattended while he sexually assaulted and murdered a young girl. So he was not considered a viable suspect.
Okay. Newsflash. Fathers can be murderers.
Right, but he was, he had his young baby in the car with him.
Perfect. Car seat.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to fight you too much on this.
I think it's like a weird train of thought that they followed.
Don't you think that there's some idea of this family guy and he couldn't possibly have done it?
Absolutely. They definitely have that schema of, a family
man. And what a good
man.
guy. He was watching his own child.
Doing the bare minimum. Good for you, Colin Pitt.
I don't know why you're struggling so much with this
Colin
name.
Pitchfork. Good for you. Sorry, I shouldn't applaud him on this podcast. I'm assuming I haven't heard the full tea yet.
After questioning Kelly on September 19th, 1987, police arrested Pitchfork, who almost immediately confessed to killing the two 15-year-old girls.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he never intended to kill them.
Oh, so it was just by accident that he murdered these two young women after sexually assaulting them.
That's his story. And his other two victims that survived might actually indicate that this is true, but it doesn't matter.
Why would they indicate that it's true?
Because he didn't kill them.
I know, but was that for a lack of effort?
No. So what I was going to say is accidentally killing someone during the commission of another heinous crime doesn't make it any better.
No less crimey just because you didn't mean to.
Like, oh, I only meant to cause irreversible trauma. So speaking of causing trauma, Pitchfork had a compulsion that started in his teenage years. He would expose himself to women, and during his interrogation, he claimed that over the last decade or so, that he had flashed his junk at over 1,000 women.
Oh my. That's definitely not a good sign.
Right.
I think there's a term for a serial flasher.
Yes.
And that would be considered a paraphilia, right?
Right. But I don't remember the term.
Okay.
So, in addition to all of this, he may have not followed them with the intention of taking their lives, but he did make an executive decision to kill them to save himself from being imprisoned, because his primary concern in those moments was that he would be easily identified by the girls.
Did he know them personally?
No, but I'm going to get into it, but some of the things that they said during the attack made him think that he was easily identifiable by them, or that they had been paying enough attention that they could identify him. When he recounted his attacks on the girls, he said that he had been driving when he spotted Lynda Mann walking onto the black pad. He parked his car. He left his baby son sleeping in the back seat of the car.
Okay.
And followed her. He exposed himself to her, and she attempted to put distance between herself and him.
A very normal reaction.
Yes, but he caught up with and overpowered her. She was grasping at straws to survive the situation and trying to humanize herself and her attacker. So she asked him about his wife, having noted his wedding ring prior to the assault.
She was observant.
Mm-hmm. And this caused Pitchfork to grow concerned that Lynda would be able to describe him to police, because he felt his receding hairline and earring were distinctive characteristics. And so rather than humanizing either one of them, her attention to detail was what ultimately caused him to panic and make a fatal decision. He had to remove the threat of her identifying him by killing her, and he did this by using her own scarf to strangle her. After this, he drove home and put his son to bed.
Well, you're right. A+ father.
Mm-hmm.
F- terrible, awful person.
Oh, yeah.
So he killed Lynda Mann because he was afraid of being identified. He used her own scarf.
Correct.
What does that tell you forensically, psychologically, to strangle someone with their own scarf? Was that just a method of convenience? Was that a punishment for being so observant?
I imagine that it was there and probably easier to... So I'm assuming that this is his first kill. And I think in that moment you're faced with this scarf that's right here, or your hands. And again, I am not apologizing for what he did. I am not justifying what he did, but he does say that he did not follow them with the intention of killing them. And I do believe that. I do believe that he panicked when she started talking about details about himself, that then he thought, oh wait, she can probably identify me. If anything, I'm saying that he was stupid early on, because the girl he did not kill could have identified him. But I don't think that he was intending to kill them. And so I think that there's maybe using your own hands to do something that you weren't even necessarily prepared to do mentally puts a little bit of distance between you and what you're doing. You can probably do it not looking them in the eye. Whereas if you're doing it by hand, you don't have that same
for him, it was less personal.
Maybe.
It wasn't about just pure speculation and conjecture.
Yes.
It was less about actually harming and killing the person and more about protecting himself from identification.
Right.
I could see how that would lead him to using a scarf, which is far less personal and invasive than to sit there with your hands wrapped around somebody's throat.
Right.
It's obviously still incredibly disgusting and disturbing and awful.
Right.
But I understand how that is a level of removal from the situation.
Sure, in the moment you're maybe removed, but nobody is stepping back looking at it and like, wow, you were really removed. That must have been so hard for you to do.
Right.
You know?
I'm not buying it.
No. When Pitchfork noticed Dawn Ashworth, he had been on a motorbike as she entered 10-Pound Lane. So he parked. This time he didn't leave a baby unattended during the commission of a murder.
Okay, that's a positive.
Yeah, he caught up with her, exposed himself, and when she attempted to flee, he grabbed her and attacked her, ultimately strangling her to prevent her from being able to identify him as well, it is believed.
And this is with his hands.
I don't know. Maybe.
So there's no mention of like a ligature or any other device that he might have used.
Yeah, there's no mention of how he actually opted to strangle Dawn. I think that the curious thing is that it seems that sometimes he is prepared to attack, and other times it is a crime of opportunity. Like in the instances in which he had actual tools that are often used to create an imbalance of power, the knife, the screwdriver, and in those situations he leaves his victim alive. But in these two instances, that's not the case. He is fearful of their ability to identify him, so he strangles them. Like, okay, did he take out the earring when he attacked with premeditation? Did he try to obscure some of these features that he was concerned were identifying features?
Did he brush his hair over his receding hairline? Did he...
Toupee.
He could take steps to prepare for the actual crime that he wanted to commit versus panicking in the midst of a crime he had not.
But also, those two crimes were very definitively crimes of opportunity. He saw these girls, saw that they were alone, saw that they were on foot, and saw that they were going into a less populated area.
Did he have a preference for girls, for teenagers?
Yes.
Okay.
I also wonder if him using the weapons made him feel more threatening and therefore less likely to have the girls report him because he used the weapons. Because they were maybe more concerned that he would kill them.
So the more fear that was instilled in them through the use of weapons, the less likely they were to report it.
Is maybe what he was thinking.
Okay. I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't completely make sense to me, but I can probably piece something together that I could understand. So the attacks that I've mentioned so far were not the only crimes he committed. It's not 100% clear if he did expose himself to more than 1,000 girls and women, but he did have a few documented instances of exposing himself and kidnap with prior acts of sexual assault dating back to October of 1977.
Oh, wow.
The first documented attack was Pitchfork exposing himself to a schoolgirl at age 17. He pleaded guilty and was given a 30-pound fine. 2 years later, at 19, was when he sexually assaulted the 16-year-old I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Probably feeling overwhelmed by love on Valentine's Day 1980, he exposed himself to 2 teens and was put on probation for a year for that. The screwdriver incident I mentioned before was October 1985, nearly 2 years after the murder of Lynda Mann. And in June 1986, a month or two before the murder of Dawn Ashworth, I don't know if it was the beginning of June or the end, Pitchfork saw Elizabeth, or Liz Knight, hitchhiking on a Saturday night and offered her a ride home. She asked him if he was a, quote, rapist, and he assured her he was not. So she got in the car with him.
That is a weirdly specific thing to ask. Just in terms of you have a level of distrust that I wouldn't think would lend itself to you deciding, okay, I will get into the vehicle with this person.
Yeah, I mean, I also can, like, you're not a murderer, are you? Like, you're not a rapist, are you?
Just as a joke.
Maybe. Or there's probably a little bit of truth behind that question, I would venture to guess. Mm-hmm. So Liz reported noticing him watching her after she got into the car and buckled her seatbelt, and she realized then that she had probably made a mistake. The trip to Liz's house was about 40 minutes, and when they neared it, she was giving him directions, but he was disregarding them. Do you know that moment where survivors of crimes that were committed against them or attempted against them, where the person transforms behind the eyes into a predator, where they talk about the eyes like being black and kind of fully dilated? And,
right. I do know what you're talking about.
yeah. She said that she saw his eyes go dark and he had an evil grin on his face. So she grabbed the steering wheel and tried to veer away from wherever he was going after he stopped following her instructions. After struggling for control of the wheel, it was like Pitchfork snapped out of it to an extent. Or at the very least, he maybe saw that he wouldn't immediately have the upper hand in the situation with Liz because she was clearly onto him.
Okay.
So he ended up driving her home, attempted to get her to kiss him goodnight. I don't think shaking your head works on a podcast.
No. I feel like he's lucky that she didn't run inside and grab a knife and murder him. Because if someone had looked at me with a look of what I described an evil grin and darkened eyes, and I was fighting with them about where to take me, sir, a good night kiss with a fist?
Yeah.
Like, what is he? Okay, is Colin Pitch? Okay.
Hey, you need to give him a little bit of credit because as he was dropping her off, he suggested that she would probably know better than to get a ride from a stranger in the future.
Wow. Sage advice.
Yeah.
Colin Pitchfork.
Good looking out, fam.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me that predators just like yourself exist. What a fucking idiot.
Indeed.
It sounds like he had a pervasive pathology that, from what you just described about this kind of turning off of seemingly this conscious mind of Colin Pitchfork and this overtaking, it makes me think of Jung and shadow work and this idea that there's our conscious self that knows how to make decisions, and there's our shadow self, which is when our darkest desires take over. And that's kind of the duality of what I feel like you just explained to me.
Yeah, it's crazy to have read her recount these types of details because a lot of people don't get to recount them. Once they see it, that's probably one of the last things that they see.
Wow.
In 1988, Pitchfork pleaded guilty to rape, murder, and indecent assaults, and was sentenced to life for the murders, 10 years for the sexual assaults, 3 years for the indecent assaults, and 3 years for avoiding giving the DNA sample initially and perverting the course of justice.
That's such an eloquent way to say obstruct.
It's so British, isn't it?
It is.
There was also a psychological analysis completed for the court that indicates that Colin Pitchfork has a psychopathic personality disorder paired with a serious psychosexual pathology.
Well, I, for one, am shocked that there were any mental issues with Colin Pitchfork. Who's Colin? With Colin Pitchfork.
How long do you think he should have been imprisoned for these crimes?
Ever. Forever.
Fair. But he pleaded guilty.
I don't give a fuck. You said he got life.
In 1994, it was decided that Pitchfork needed to serve a minimum of 30 years in prison.
Wasn't he given life?
Yes.
Is that not what you said to me?
Yes, but the crazy thing is in some places, and I'm not speaking for this place in particular, but in, I want to say most places, life is actually a numerical value. that is set, and the number depends on where you are. But life does not mean until you die.
Stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that that's dumb, but okay.
So the minimum was reduced to 28 years in 2009.
For the murder of 2 people?
2 teenage girls.
Disgusting.
In 2016, the year he became eligible for parole, Rebecca Eastwood, Lynda Mann's sister, fought to prevent Pitchfork from being moved to an open condition jail.
Let me guess. That was a fruitless endeavor.
Her efforts were unsuccessful, and he was moved to a Category C facility after being deemed a model prisoner.
I guess he didn't strangle anyone with their own scarf while in prison.
The funny thing is that he was a model prisoner, which does align, as far as I have understood it, with a psychopathic personality disorder. So, no shit.
He knows how to model the right behavior.
Right. Again, that was 2016. A year later, he was granted a supervised day pass and monitored with a tracking device, which allowed him to leave prison and go shopping.
Did he go down any footpaths?
Not that time, because he was supervised. In 2018, he was denied parole, but was seen walking around unsupervised in Bristol. So it was assumed that he moved to Prison Leyhill in Gloucestershire, where I guess unsupervised day passes are a thing.
How are you in prison and you just get a day pass to go out and do whatever?
I don't know.
Hell, Britannia. But to what extent? What is going on? What is happening in Britain?
I don't know. I mean, are we going to get into the American justice system?
We know that the
versus
American
others
justice system is
compared to
not
others?
great. We know that it's not rehabilitative. We know that it often fails to meet the standards of what should exist. I'm sure it's my own ignorant American perception, but I would much rather a convicted murderer be in prison than just out on the streets of
Gloucestershire.
Gloucestershire.
I'm more concerned that they have disregarded the psychopathic personality disorder that...
Along with his paraphilia.
Right, that the psychological analysis revealed or diagnosed. But I also know that in the US, you have to go based off of whatever the standard was at the time of the crime, not the current time. So if in 1986 there was a maximum, remember in Mary Vincent, if there was a maximum of 7 years for attempted murder, then even if they weren't caught and convicted until 2019, they would still only be able to get 7 years.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the same in England, but I know that that is a thing in the US. Pitchfork's next parole review was due to happen in 2020.
Okay. But a global pandemic.
But got pushed back because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in early June 2021, the parole board deemed him safe for release, and so he was released.
Dumb. Okay. Thank you, parole board. 2021 release. 2022 murder?
The Justice Secretary didn't agree with him being released and asked the board to reconsider, which they did after he breached his release provisions by approaching young women while taking leisurely and presumably innocent strolls.
Presumably.
Nothing similar to prior criminal behavior to see here.
Yeah, presumably a fucking board of idiots.
So in November 2021, Pitchfork was recalled and re-imprisoned.
I'm sure he had good excuses.
He sought parole again in 2023.
Okay.
But ministers and the parole board challenged his second approval for parole, and in December 2023, he was ultimately not granted parole.
Good. That makes me feel better.
But he has since applied for reconsideration of this parole determination. His application for reconsideration was approved in February of this year.
Okay.
And in May 2024, They set the date for his parole hearing to be July 8th, 2024. But that has been pushed back. So who knows when we will actually have an update on this case.
Awesome.
Whenever we do, we'll make sure to post it.
100%.
And Colin Pitchfork is the first murderer to have been put away using DNA profiling.
It's so funny to me, and it's not actually funny, it's frustrating.
Right.
He is the first man to be put away through genetic testing, our most infallible method of determining if someone is guilty of committing murder.
Right.
And again, I say most infallible, not that it is infallible, but the most resistant to error. Mm-hmm. And that still doesn't buy him a genuine lifetime.
I know. I knew exactly what you were going to say, because that was my thought too whenever I was researching this. I was like, this is undeniably, we didn't put him away based on his blood type matching. This is DNA extraction methodologies implemented for the first time going into solving this crime, matching his DNA and putting him away. And I think it's similar to how the O.J. Simpson trial, because DNA was still so young, it was not fully understood or accepted by the people who were on the jury or the people who were responsible for ensuring that this person was put away. And so I wonder if that was also something that was at play here, but I don't understand how we're going back and forth in 2024 with him about this. Like, nah, you did this.
It is incontrovertible proof.
And you proved in 2021 that you would do this again. You approached young women.
That you were raring to do it again.
Right. Within weeks, months of being released.
Yeah, that psychopathology is a little too strong.
Right. So maybe we put a little bit more stock into that, because we know that psychopathy is not something that can be rehabilitated. But I see the slippery slope there of then an over diagnosis of psychopathy in an attempt to keep people locked away who maybe don't necessarily have the inability to be rehabilitated that way.
Right.
So technically, 1987 in the UK is when DNA was first used to put someone away. And I think I mentioned in the Sherry Rasmussen case that it was 1986, but I misspoke. That was when the crime was committed, but the advancement wasn't implemented in the search until the following year. So that's the first case to have ever been solved using DNA.
What an interesting piece of true crime history.
I thought so. And it was in England, so I was...
You hear that, British listeners? We're pandering to you.
Pandering? They're my people.
It was a great case. I enjoyed listening to it. Thank you for bringing me up to speed on how DNA became the modern tool that it is.
Learning you up.
There you go. That's what it's all about.
Thank you. A complete list of sources and any links can be found in the show notes.
And that's all we've got for this episode. If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review.
Recommend us to a friend, and make sure you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
Like us on Facebook at Until the End of Crime, and join our discussion group.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com. So send us an email with questions, requests, or episode suggestions.
Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.